Imagine if you could just make a tiny change in the way that you use technology and generate a $300 million return. It might sound a bit silly, but it's not a pipe dream. I'd like to share a story told by Rory Sutherland, who's vice chairman at Ogilvy Group, about a $300 million button. He said, there was once an e-commerce site that once you'd filled your shopping basket and clicked on buy, gave you two choices, sign in or register. Now, it turns out that for some strange reason, we don't particularly like registering before we buy. It's seen as an asymmetric transaction. But once we bought something, we are happy to provide our email address because we know we need it to receive what we've just bought. And so Rory explained that a change that cost just $15 to make, which was to change the text of one of the buttons from register to continue, led to an increase in sales over the course of the next year of $300 million. At Saffron, we believe in a world in which your business or organization is continually performing better and generating more profit. We believe it's possible, and we do it by helping organizations to find their equivalent of that $300 million button. The answer is not necessarily new technology. It's actually a better understanding of how we use technology and where technology meets psychology. So my name's Toby Harris, and I'm Platforms Product Manager at Saffron Interactive. I'm here with Alastair Maclean, who's our Head of Design and Development. And we want to show you today how the kind of user experience that Facebook and LinkedIn use to distract your people from their work, to sell advertising to you or to sell recruitment services, to actually capture the insights from your organization and commoditize them, how that kind of user experience can be applied in the opposite direction. Now, you can call what we're going to talk about knowledge management, you can call it informal learning, but really it is about connecting problems with solutions. It's about connecting people with other people through smart and behavioral user experiences. So what is your equivalent of a $300 million button? I'm pretty sure that most of you would be quite happy with finding a $3 million button or even a $1 million button. At Saffron, we want to help you find and redesign those buttons. And this is an extended metaphor now, I hope you realize. And that's what we're going to look at in the next 30 minutes. This is a model of how we get from data to insight. Generally, we have quite a lot of this stuff at the bottom and nowhere near enough of this stuff at the top. And I wonder if anyone in the audience, is quite noisy, so you're going to have to shout. If anyone can give me an example of just data, discrete, objective facts about an event. Example of data, anyone? Yep.
Just sales.
Sales, yeah, exactly. Just the sales figures for product A. That's just data. Now, we might kind of turn that data into information when we say that these were the sales in Q2, for example, when it starts to apply some context to that. So let's run with that sales example. When does that example become knowledge? When does that item of data become knowledge, experience, values, and context that's applicable to that message? So taking that sales figure. Anyone? I will jump on someone if no one puts their hand up. So, all right, this guy. I don't know. Okay, any other example of knowledge?
I'm at a loss.
Okay, so knowledge might be when someone says, well, I could have seen that drop in sales coming because the weather was bad that weekend. You know, like, why did you have so many barbecues out on show? What's wrong with your, you know, kind of planning there? Now, what about insight? Well, insight, I think, is something quite different because it refers to the collective application of knowledge in action. And a much older way of describing insight would be to say it was wisdom. It's actually the ability for a number of people to work together. And in that kind of example of the sales dropping in Q2 example, that would be a system or a culture of sharing which would let those salespeople know or those business development managers know that sales were going to drop in advance to let them take action around it. Now, the problem with this pyramid and how it relates to how we manage knowledge and performance in organizations is that we tend to go to internal sources like the wiki, like the intranet, when we want data or information. Just login details, passwords, just an isolated fact. But when we want insight or knowledge, we actually tend to go to external platforms like LinkedIn or Google. We Google it. And this is a bit of a problem because we go there to find insight, to see what we should be doing differently, to try and predict problems, we also end up contributing our insight to those commoditized platforms as well. And in fact, even when we spend time on Google or LinkedIn, we also contribute our behavioral data to that platform, which those platforms then use to sell insights back to us. So Google gains insight about your people's training needs that you should be really using. It should be our organizations that are benefiting when people are sharing and gaining new insights, when they're gathering and developing that collective wisdom, at least in the short and medium term before it gets shared with Google and the rest of the internet. Now, I want people to put their hands up of who has used an Uber in the past 6 months. Few people, okay. And who has booked an Airbnb rather than a hotel in the past year? Okay, that's good. If no one had put their hands up, or they were like, this is not a pretty uncool audience, really. But anyway, I think that really shows these are really disruptive industries, incredibly disruptive industries, and they're a product of a digital transformation. The digital transformation of society has created very different needs for users, and it's created very different challenges for organizations. If you're an underperforming hotel chain, Airbnb is a challenge which you will find hard to overcome. Effectively, what the prevalence of digital technology means is that for people in L&D, our roles are kind of basically have been reduced to maybe 2 tasks. The first task is training people how to use the software they need to use to do their role. And the second and more important task is training people on how to do the big list of things which computers cannot do, which artificial intelligence cannot do. Those are things like creativity, complex problem solving, communication with each other, leadership. And this really constitutes whether your organization will surf the kind of wave of digital transformation or whether it will drown in it.
This chart shows the amount of ISBN numbers issued on a yearly basis. So I don't know if you can see the numbers here, but in 2003, we have 300,000 ISBN numbers issued, while in 2012, that number's grown to 15 million. So this trend is for ISBN numbers, but I think it's fair to assume that the same trend is also happening for data inside your organizations or data just sitting externally on other resources. So if we stick with if we hold with that example for the moment with ISBN numbers, the problem is really around how do you present this information in a way which is going to help someone choose the next book or find the next resource that is sitting on your network. So this is a quote from Yogesh Malhotra, who's a managing director at JP Morgan. So what I think this quote is highlighting is the fact that data needs to be delivered effectively. If we miss out on delivering this effectively, then the users are going to disengage from the content, and they're just going to look elsewhere. They'll look on other wikis, other sources. They'll just move on from the platform that we're actually trying to push them towards. Effectively, the challenge is all about dealing with how to deliver things effectively. How quickly can information be gathered, and how do people find the best expert or resource in the current platform? So if we take a look at consumer sites, looking externally, what do these other sites do that's different? Because they still have the same problem of the actual volume of data, the speed of change, and they still have to engage with the users and make sure that they're willing to actually spend some time there and find the right resource. So if we look at these in more detail, we'll actually find that every click is rewarding. The users are engaged to actually work with the content. They can save this. They can, they've got a lot of addictive features which keep them up to date with the content that's available. The connections are also validated, so this could be validated against your peers. This could be someone in your network who's also suggested an article which is useful, might be useful for a particular task you need to do in your role, for instance. And then there's also context applied. So again, this is outside of your network. This may be other peers who've actually put their own experience or context on the data that's there. It's taking it from data at the sort of bottom level of the pyramid and slowly moving it up the pyramid to something which is actually more useful for your organization.
So where do you go to find insight and information that you need to do your job better? Does anyone have any examples of the platforms you use to find something that's going to help you to perform better? Most of us spend most of our days trying to find the right information and insight. Any platforms that people prefer to use? What's your first port of call? Anyone want to volunteer something? You just sat down.
We're a law firm, so it would be our providers that we look at, generally going straight to them for legal knowledge.
So law firms have to do knowledge management generally quite well, don't they? How many people would use Google to find information they need? Anyone? So what we found was actually, maybe, I don't know if it's, I guess, no less shocking for how unsurprising it is, really. But 85% of people list Google as one of their main sources of insight at work, closely followed by asking a colleague and LinkedIn. So Ali's going to look at these kind of different things and see, well, what's setting them apart? What's the difference between these things and our internal platforms?
So if we look at the usability of these different platforms, for instance, just as a sort of overview, I think we can make some assumptions. So Google, for instance, is pretty instant, and if you don't get the results that you're looking for, you'll adjust your search and look for something else. You might look on another page, which again could be from somewhere that you trust. It may be you're sort of ranking something from the BBC or Wikipedia or another sort of organisation higher than something else. So you are doing a lot of the filtering here yourself. Asking a person, that's pretty instant as well. And if you're not getting the result that you're after, you'll look elsewhere. Asking a person also gives you extra context in terms of past experience. So maybe there's some past experience which isn't available on a network or on Google or on some other organisation. LinkedIn, again, is pretty instant. We have context which is given to us. So this could be through our peer network or through suggestions through the actual platform. And then finally, we have our knowledge management system, which may have some of the features that I've just mentioned, but most likely it doesn't have most of those features. Most likely it's out of date, the content isn't verified, and your patience with that platform is probably not going to last very long.
So I think this summarizes kind of what's not going so well in terms of trying to capture and retain insight and get people to engage with platforms. And there is a big cost associated with this. So there's $115 billion of missed opportunities associated with production technologies due to lost knowledge. Problem of knowledge obsolescence, something that Ali mentioned about a lot of these platforms, is that they're constantly maintained, they're easy to filter, they're up to date. Whereas a lot of people's experience of logging into an intranet or an internal knowledge-based system is they're going to find that it's completely out of date and they'll go elsewhere. And I wonder how many people in an organization might be tapping into LinkedIn to see how to conduct a performance appraisal because they're pretty sure that the procedure on the LMS is out of date anyway. And this productivity is a huge part of what we want to demonstrate and what we want to show today. When someone leaves an organization and we have to accept that people don't have jobs for life anymore, that will happen and it will happen more and more, The cost of replacing them is a further 85% of their salary due to the mistakes that the people make. So platforms like LinkedIn and Facebook, they're pretty good at kind of capturing pretty much everything about us and distilling it. But often, our most knowledgeable people, our sources of insight, kind of walk out the door. So this is what you might encounter if you're using a knowledge management system at a FTSE 250 organization.
Yeah, this isn't a particularly compelling experience for someone that actually wants to raise a question. So if you're faced with this, I'd imagine you might think twice about actually submitting this and expecting to get anything back from there. But if you do actually submit this, what would actually happen is that an email is broadcast out to a group of peers, and then possibly one of those peers might respond. Most likely, all of those peers will assume that someone else is responding. So we don't really know whether someone's actually given a response, whether the response was actually the right response. It could have been the wrong response. So again, it's not a particularly efficient sort of format for sending out or answering questions. I mean, this is an example. Perhaps the examples that you're aware of are slightly different, but I think the same principle applies in terms of just trying to make this thing usable, trying to engage with people. People are used to using pretty slick platforms these days, like LinkedIn, for instance, like Google, which are generally pretty instant, and you're doing all of the filtering yourself.
Just a couple of quotes from our survey, just highlighting what kind of problems these issues are causing and how they relate specifically to performance, productivity, to money, really. Multiple occasions when a better KMS or knowledge system would allow for better collaboration, the problems they face every day. We have to recognize that people routinely do not solve problems and that they spend the entire day having not solved a key problem simply because they couldn't talk to the right person or find the right information. This is a retail organization and lacking a central store of information about their technical products, which is up to date, means time is wasted by customer service assistants answering questions. Some people think that the use of Google as opposed to internal system is limited to relatively skilled knowledge workers, but that's not the case. In fact, many customer service assistants are now increasingly starting to rely on Google for information about their own company's products, which is surely not an ideal source of information. Something does need to be done better here because this is a real need, and like I said, our purpose of this seminar is to say that knowledge affects performance directly. You know, it's not something that's separate. So we wanted to do something differently.
So this is our approach on what we'd actually do differently to make a knowledge management system more usable. So what we'll see on the next slides is actually our Saffron Share proposal for this.
Okay, and we're now about to jump into live demonstration mode, so please do forgive me if it goes terribly wrong. Do you want to come over here?
Okay.
So this is the front page once you've logged into the system. And from here, there's a lot of things that are available, but the first thing I wanted to point out is the search. The search is generally, in terms of the search over the years, the last 10 years or so, it's evolved quite a lot. So we now expect search to do a lot of things. Search, everything that's on our PC, emails. If it's in terms of Google systems, it will be searching all this kind of like big data-esque type things. So search here is one of the sort of key elements. And within this system, it's actually searching through our posts, it's searching through all the things that are in the system, comments, articles, descriptions, and so on. Basically to try and make it as simple for me to find the information that I actually want. So if I, for instance, type in, I can quickly see the results that are applicable for this kind of search term. And within the search, I can also see the context. So, this is kind of painting a picture for me, which is going to help me make a decision around which of these articles is worth me pursuing. Whether it's something from someone that I know, something that's got a lot of ratings, something that's been viewed a lot of comments. All of these things are actually going to sort of start to help me figure out which article, which resource, which course, which person to connect with.
Now, we talked about data at the beginning, and we kind of feel that there is this problem that analytics are increasingly important to businesses and business information, and a lot of you will work for companies that feed all the data that happens from any system into a big business information system. And that's very good for connecting dots. But if you want to connect people, and that's a very important kind of aspect of connecting people with knowledge, you need dashboards rather than just that use of business kind of analytics. And so we made dashboards quite an integral part of how this system works. And one thing I want to stress is that the point of analytics is actually to use one of the most valuable kind of contributions which our users making to the system. Now, that contribution is not just entering lots of text, inputting stuff. We've all seen knowledge platforms, talent platforms that promise huge results as long as the learner fills in a form which takes them 2 hours, which most of them don't do. Learners are providing, or users are providing, useful stuff about what they need and what they know, quite simply just by, tagging something when they post it. So here we're kind of assessing what expertise this person has got. And also, it's really useful just to feed back. If you posted something, what was useful to other people? Did other people like it? Was it interesting? And was it something they could apply? Again, all we need to kind of build up a network of associations in terms of the posts and the communities that people have here is quite simply for them to like something and actually to basically generate a network of connections between people and to make sure that we're capturing everything that they have found useful. And I'll let Ali make some more points about dashboards.
The other perspective here is that what we're doing is to make this dashboard actually compelling for the user. We're trying to take the data that's normally hidden and reserved for the administrators of a system like this. So, giving this back to the user gives them some ownership over the actions they're taking in the system. So, as they add more content, they'll see that their profile has been built up. As they comment on other people's articles or resources in the system, they'll see that this is actually contributing to their own benefit. They're building up a clearer picture of themselves and can use this to sort of share within teams and so on.
The other big facet of systems people actually use, which we really wanted to think about, is how information and knowledge is organized. And we kind of thought, well, a lot of platforms that people use all the time, like Spotify, like Netflix, are making increasing use of playlists of content. Now, some people are quite skeptical about whether a playlist can work in the context of, say, a learning system. But I think that I think they are directly relevant to performance, and I want to kind of explain why. So, if I asked you to put together a 4-week induction program because one new person was joining your team, and I said, I want you to put together a tailored 4-week program that contains all of the skills and knowledge that you need in order to do your role, and I want you to put that in a digital format because I don't want you to be spending too much of your time face-to-face. And you'd turn around to me and you'd say, well, why should I spend 2 weeks on doing something that's only going to take 2 to 4 weeks to finish anyway? There's no point in doing that. I'd spend a lot of time writing exercises, a lot of time doing activities and so on. Alternatively, if I said, all I want you to do is gather together all of the resources that you found useful from all over the organization, and again, this is an act of curation, pulling stuff from different places, something from the intranet, something from the LMS, and from external sources as well, and put that into a playlist that they could follow. And I just want you to keep adding to that playlist every time you find something new. Now, obviously, it's not going to do the whole job of training something, but in terms of impacting their performance, if there are a set of things, the mistakes you're going to make, here's that YouTube video on how to do that thing in Excel that no one really knows how to do until they have to do this particular role. Not only is it something that's much easier for you to put together, it's just something much more applicable. And that learner, if they're a Generation Y type learner, is going to respond to that playlist of content a lot better as well than being given a traditional program.
Playlists also give us another way to actually apply more context on the data that we've got. So going back to the pyramid, we can then take data from being the sort of lower level to progressing up towards being something along the lines of insight. And insight, again, is something that can power this whole thing. If you can see that a lot of people are doing a playlist around an induction or a particular topic, then you can understand that maybe the actual structured content around an induction is not performing as well as it should be. Maybe there are other resources that are more applicable. And all of this can happen through your own users actually applying more context on the data, because there is, most likely there's too much data to actually work with, just raw, basically. So your users can actually help you with this.
And I think that the prospect of what the idea of said, well, now all I want you to do is whenever something helps you in your role, whenever there's a post that you kind of come across, or whenever there's an activity, or even whenever there's a kind of a discussion, or something that helps you, I just want you to use one button, just add to playlist, which is focused on your role. Then we kind of open up that prospect that we could have an organization which was full of personalized playlists that are extremely role specific, that are constantly adapting to the performance goals that you have, that you can influence, you can track, and that are adapting when things change. And I think that kind of brings us closer. And again, I've got to jump back into a slide again now. That brings us closer to this idea. And we're starting to see this now with kind of systems like Google Now, which is obviously consumer focused. That in the future, we won't discover what we need to know how to perform better. We won't have to search for it. We won't have to trawl through folders or look through the intranet. It will actually discover us. And I think that's the thought that we kind of want to leave you on today as the final point that we want to make, is that this is really the future for performance technology that we believe in. It's technology that can take steps which are hard to imagine now. So it's not just one $300 million button, but maybe it's quite a lot of $300 million buttons that are all working together for a whole lot of people. Now, obviously, you can stand just there. It's only quite small, so fit all of you on there at the same time. But you're welcome to come over and actually try out our product, ask about how it's been used and how it might apply to your situation. And I think I've got a couple of minutes if anyone has any questions now. So thank you very much for your time. Any questions? It's always hard to ask. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I suppose I like the idea of building a knowledge base that's personalised, but how do you manage the volume of that? So you take someone new into an organisation that can benefit from the knowledge of the people that are already there, but your playlist could get far too big. Is a downside I could see to that.
Yeah, there is a possibility, and I think this could be something that needs to be tailored on different solutions. So maybe a playlist isn't the right solution for everybody, but I think a playlist is a pretty powerful way of adding extra context. So I think this isn't a solution that will work in every application, but these are the right kind of ways to actually add extra context. The task is really to get data from just data and move it up the scale, really. So perhaps practically we need to kind of limit the amount of playlists that someone can use, give them some sort of restriction, or maybe just find another solution. But, I think there are elements of this which, you see in consumer sites every day, and these are the kind of things we should be adding.
I think the one tool that we've used to counter that particular problem when you are trying to push out something like this to a large organization is almost looking at, well, how does something like Facebook or LinkedIn try and manage that same problem? Is that so many people posting content? And one of the ways of doing that is kind of trying to filter content based on people's behavior. So maybe you're only showing people a manageable pool of information, and only occasionally are you pushing something else out. But yeah, it's definitely, the reality is that as the platform gets bigger and as the amount of people get bigger, the analytics that you need in order to structure and personalize that experience do get more complicated. But I do think that it's worth pursuing. If it's one place you can integrate all of these different feeds in of knowledge, it is something that's worth kind of thinking about. How do you rationalize what you've got into one place? But thank you for the questions. Good point. Any other questions? Okay, I think the guy's looking at me saying you need to finish now anyway. So thanks a lot, everyone, and yeah, have a good day. Cheers.